seated and be on time tomorrow. Okay, the first document up this afternoon, carried from this morning, is document 12.5, selection of nominees for committee chairs. There's no document, but we'll receive an oral update from the CITES Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. As outlined in notification to the parties number 2024-119 of 28th October 2024, the selection process is underway for nominees to serve as officers at COP20. The Standing Committee is charged with nominating candidates for the posts of Chair, Alternate Chair, and 2 Vice Chairs to preside over plenary sessions, as well as chairs for Committee 1, Committee 2, and the Credentials Committee. I would like to remind the Standing Committee and observer parties to submit their nominations to the selection panel through the CITES Secretary General by 24th March 2025 at the latest. We strongly encourage nominations that reflect geographical balance, and we particularly welcome nominations of women candidates. Further details on the selection procedure is found in the annex to notification number 2024-119. Thank you, Chair.
I will open up the floor briefly for any comments. Standing Committee members? I have Georgia.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, let me thank all the donors supporting the sponsored delegates project. This allows participation of countries in the meetings and therefore effective conduct of the meetings. At the same time, we can also agree with the proposed amendments to the resolution Conf 70.3 suggested by the Secretariat in the document AC 78, document 12.6. Thank you.
Sorry, Georgia, if I wasn't clear, we're on document 12.5. So I'll get to you on 12.6, the selection of committee chairs. So any comments from other Standing Committee members on document 12.5? I will open the floor to parties. Observer organizations? All right, then essentially not seeing any further discussion, I ask the Standing Committee is invited to note this document. Do I see thumbs up or nodding heads that we note this document? Then it's been noted. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is 12.6, Sponsored Delegates Project and COP20 Sponsored Delegates Decision 18.12, and again, document 12.6. I will call the Secretariat to introduce this document.
Thank you, Chair. The document provides an update on the Sponsored Delegates Project and COP20 Sponsored Delegates Project. After issuance of this document, Germany provided new funding, complementing contributions from the European Union and Slovakia, which are thankfully acknowledged. We kindly request the potential donors to transfer funds as soon as possible and no later than 5 months before the meeting of COP, allowing the Secretariat to utilize them early in COP preparations. The document also proposes clear selection criteria for the project and suggests financial support for delegates from developing country parties under an Article 13 process. The Standing Committee is invited to note this document and to propose to COP20 to incorporate Decision 18.12a and Decision 19.10a into Resolution Conf 17.3 Rev COP 19 on the Sponsored Delegates Project. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor to the Standing Committee members. I call on Georgia.
Just 1 minute. So thank you again, Chair. First of all, let me thank all the donors supporting the sponsored delegates project. This allows participation of countries in the meetings and therefore effective conduct of the meetings. At the same time, we can also agree with the proposed amendments to the resolution Conf 70.3 suggested by the Secretariat in the document SC 78-12.6. Thank you, Chair.
Any other standing committee members wishing to take the floor on document 12.6? Observer parties? I have Senegal.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam. We are happy to support this proposal, and we would certainly agree that if there were additional resources available, support could be given to some countries. And now we have just one sponsor delegate per country, and that does impose some limitations on us. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the Central African Republic.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam. I would like to take this opportunity to support this proposal. It would be good to have additional resources mobilized in order to favor the participation of developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other observer party wishing to speak? Observer organizations? I've not had anyone not supporting the proposed incorporation of Decision 1812, Paragraph A, and Decision 1910, Paragraph A, into the Resolution Comp 17.3 on sponsored delegate projects as contained in the annex to this document. So if I don't hear I'll look for nodding heads from the Standing Committee that they support this change. Well, I see some nodding heads, and I'm going to take silence as acceptance. So the Standing Committee agrees with this proposed change and with the amendments to Resolution Comp 17.3, Decisions 18.12 and Decision 19.10 have been implemented and then can also be proposed for deletion to COP 20. And with that, I conclude this item, this agenda item. And we move on to agenda item 13, arrangements for COP meetings. And I again turn to the Secretariat to present document 13.
Thank you, Chair. This document provides an overview of the financial and logistical challenges associated with hosting CITES Conference of the Parties meetings, particularly in cases where no host country is identified. In reviewing recent experiences, the Secretariat explores funding options and strategies to ensure better preparedness for future COPs. On a positive note, we would like to inform you that Panama has generously made an official offer to host COP21. The Standing Committee is invited to acknowledge Panama's offer, consider the inclusion of a new budget line in the CITES Core Trust Fund for COP organization, and review the new draft decisions on arrangements for future COP meetings contained in the annex. Thank you, Chair.
would like to request if Panama would like to speak before I open up debate on the other suggestions in this document.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As this is the first time Panama has taken the floor, we would like to thank the Swiss government for hosting this meeting. We would also like to thank members of the Standing Committee who, along with other participants, are helping us achieve great objectives. We would also like to thank the Secretariat for their tireless work. We hosted COP19, which was held in 2021. Panama is very pleased to have shared 2 weeks of work and hosted that work, which had us taking decisions leading to conservation and sustainable use of the wildlife of our rich culture. This concerning those species that are traded internationally. We were also pleased to have the opportunity to share our culture, our nature, and our great variety. In the interest of continuing to offer hospitality and cooperation. And that is why we decided to offer once again to host the CITES COP. And we certainly hope that this standing committee will be considered by this committee and agreed by COP20 to be held in Uzbekistan. Panama is committed to honoring any commitments made with respect to the preparation of a COP and to ensure that everything will be done in order to ensure that we have a secure and compassionate COP working hand in hand with the environment and ensuring that everything is done to ensure that the participants of each and every country can attend. We hope that there will be yet another COP held in the Americas in Panama. Thank you.
So I would ask the Standing Committee acknowledge with much appreciation Panama's offer to host COP21. And then there are two other items remaining in this document, and one is to discuss the new budget line in the operational budget under the CITES Core Trust Fund for the triennium 226 to 228, and discussion on the draft decisions contained in 20AA to 20CC on arrangements for meetings of the Conference of the Parties in the annex to this document. And so I'm looking to see if we have any comments on those two items. From Standing Committee members first. Okay, I have US, Belgium, Georgia, Oceania. So USA first.
Thank you. The United States believes this item should be referred to the Finance and Budget Subcommittee. In line with our policy on zero nominal growth, we cannot accept any increases to the core budget. Thank you.
Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As regard to recommendation A, indeed, we acknowledge with appreciation Panama's offer to host COP21, and we do highlight the importance of such voluntary offers to ensure the effective organization of the CITES meetings. As regard to recommendation B, we support the inclusion of a budget line in principle, but provided that it addresses the gap identified for the Geneva-based COPs, so up to 2 million per meeting, The additional voluntary contributions from countries continue to be encouraged to reduce reliance on the core trust fund, and that more clarity is provided by the Secretariat regarding the following. Is the 1.2 to 2 million gap referenced in the zero real growth budget scenario? Because checking the SC 78 document 8, that remains unclear to us. And how much of the core trust fund balance would be allocated? Is the balance sufficient to cover potential gaps without impacting other essential activities? And would the Standing Committee be empowered to allocate funds from the core trust fund savings for COPs in absence of a host country? As regards to recommendation C, we agree to submit the draft decisions 20AA to 20CC. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Georgia.
Thank you, Chair. This agenda item is of utmost importance as we believe that ensuring the smooth organization of COP meetings is essential. In our view, the most effective way to address the challenges is to include a new budget line within the core budget, at least to cover part of expenses. However, it's also crucial to assess how this adjustment would affect annual contribution levels. Using registration fees for this purpose does not seem feasible, and if this would affect the number of sponsored delegates. Fundraising or innovative funding option, of course, seems sensible. The possibility of shortening in-person meetings could also be discussed. However, it should be noted that online negotiations do not seem to be effective for various reasons, including differences in time zones. Therefore, this option should be carefully reviewed to ensure that all parties feel comfortable. Regarding the option to limit in-person participants, we think that while it would be difficult to limit the size of delegations, limiting in-person participation in plenary and committee session is an interesting suggestion. We strongly support the rotation among regions to host COP meetings. However, the rotation should not be considered mandatory. And if none of the countries from a region are willing to host, other regions should have the opportunity to step in. We agree with the draft decisions as outlined in the documents SC 78, document 13, and finally, we of course very much welcome the offer from Panama to host us again, and we would like to thank the government of Panama for the generous hospitality. I thank you.
Thank you. I call on Oceania, New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. Oceania acknowledges that recent scenarios have demonstrated the need for improved preparedness, both in terms of finance and procedures, to support the identification of a host country and to provide for the organisation of the COP in a timely manner. For this reason, and to provide certainty, we support the Secretariat's recommendation 17B to include a line item for the COP in the Core Trust Fund budget for the triennium 2026 to 28. And we support the associated draft decision 20BB that provides for the Finance and Budget Subcommittee to continue the consideration of improved financial preparedness for future COPs. We also support proposed decision 20CC directing the Secretariat to develop further guidance. Further, for the summary record, Oceania wants to record its preference that in identifying means of reducing the cost of any COP, any online meetings for this purpose should also follow the modalities for online committee meetings set out in Agenda Item 10. It is important that any online meetings for COP purposes are equitable in terms of time zones across regions. It's very challenging for small Oceania parties to participate in virtual meetings outside office hours. We also want to record our view that any changes to reduce the cost of the COP should also continue to provide for the fulsome participation of parties and observer organisations. And finally, we wish to also highlight for the record, with regards to paragraph 13A, that as a region comprised of relatively small parties, Oceania does not support rotating responsibility between regions for the purposes of hosting the COP. The capacity of parties across the regions is not equitable, even if our region was to support a host country, as the report suggests. Thank you.
Thank Thank you. I call on Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to support the comment made by the U.S., and this document should be discussed in the budgetary subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you. I've heard that there are questions from Belgium on the core budget, and also the United States wanting to refer this to the Budget and Finance Subcommittee, so I'll turn to the Secretariat for a response.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the question on the core budget for the COP arrangements. As of today, in the current budget, the triennial budget for 2023 to 2025, we have in this year, this fiscal year, 2025, 30,000 in the core budget for logistic support to COP. Nothing else. Thank you.
I have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support the comments made by the US and Kuwait. If the COP fee cost for holding a COP to be added as a new budget item, the same amount it's supposed to be scrapped from somewhere else. So scrap and build, that must be the basis of our consideration. So this issue we suggest to be discussed in the budget subcommittee. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll now open the floor to party observers wishing to speak on this document, 13, and the decisions in it. I have Senegal.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam. This is a key issue. This morning, we heard about how things have changed between COP 16 to 19 and the number of proposals that we have to tackle. So we need to find ways of dealing with this workload and study all of these documents. So while we wouldn't reject the U.S. proposal, this is a matter that should be considered by the Finance and Budget Subcommittee, but let's not ignore it. We need to tackle this. As for Panama, the COP that they hosted went very well, so all I would say right now to Panama is muchas gracias.
Thank you. Any other party observers wishing to speak to this? Any observer organizations? So I'd like to sort of sum up where I think we are on this item and a way forward for the Standing Committee. We all appreciate Panama's offer. I think that's been accepted and acknowledged. In terms of the request to include a new budget line in the operational budget under the CITES Core Trust Fund, I would suggest that discussion of that item happen here at the Budget and Sub-Finance Committee, and perhaps they can report back to us at the end of the week when they give report on the other matters referred to that working group. So that would be the way forward on recommendation B in paragraph 17. And then recommendation C in paragraph 17, I've heard nothing but support for the idea to review and submit to the Conference of the Parties draft decisions 20AA to 20CC on arrangements for meetings of the Conference of the Parties contained in the annex to this document. I look to the Standing Committee members if they are agreeing to this approach as we move forward. So recommendation B will be discussed this week by the Budget and Finance Subcommittee and report back to us, but I think we can basically accept recommendation C. I'm seeing nodding heads, and so we will consider that done and move on to the next agenda item. Thank you. Okay, now we're on to the afternoon agenda, and this is definitely one of those trial projects. I will call on the chairs of Animals and Plants to introduce document 6, which is the report of the chairs of the Animals and Plants committees. However, in this document, it is quite a hefty document, and Secretariat has taken a new approach to it, so please pay close attention to AC and PC chair reports, and then I will guide us through the recommendations from the chairs. However, in doing so, there is a lot in this document, so hopefully we can tackle it one by one, but I do ask for interventions to be brief and respect our time limit. So I now call on the chair of the Plants Committee to report on document 6. And if we can give the floor to Gabon, the chair of the Plants Committee, Flora.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document reports on the activities carried out by the Animals and Plants Committee since the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee. It summarizes the outcomes of the 27th meeting of the Plants Committee and the 33rd meeting of the Animals Committee as relevant to the Standing Committee. The document is structured in 3 sections. I will introduce section 1, and the chair of the Animals Committee will introduce sections 2 and 3. The recommendations from all 3 sections are summarized in paragraph 92 of document SC 78.6. We have a summary of PC 27 to be considered by the Standing Committee. There are 7 items that were discussed at that meeting, will be considered by the Standing Committee in standalone documents at this meeting. And the table in paragraph 6 shows you what those items are. Then there are 10 other items that are covered in paragraph 7 to 30. Annex 1 provides a compilation of the draft decisions agreed by the Plants Committee at PC 27 that are relevant to these 10 items. Of these 10 items, I would like to highlight 3 items where the Standing Committee is invited to take some action at this meeting. 1. Cooperation with the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation. The Standing Committee is invited to request the Secretariat, in consultation with the chairs of the PC and the Standing Committee, to revise the text, if required, on the CITES complementary actions presented in draft revisions to Resolution Conf 16.5 on cooperation with a global strategy for plant conservation agreed by the Plants Committee and contained in Section A of Annex 1. 2. Identification of timber and other wood products. The SC is invited to review and submit the draft decisions in Section B of Annex 1 for consideration to COP20. 3. Agar-wood producing taxa. The Standing Committee is invited to review and submit the proposed amendments in Resolution Conf 1610 on the implementation of the Convention for Agar-wood producing taxa presented in Section C of Annex 1 for consideration to COP20. I would now, with your permission, Madam, like to have you pass the floor to the Chair of the Animals Committee to introduce the rest of this document. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. I now pass the floor to the Chair of the Animals Committee to introduce the rest of the document. I call upon Switzerland, but I know it's the Animals Committee Chair, but it comes up as Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Section 2 outlines the outcomes from the 33rd meeting of the Animals Committee that are relevant to the Standing Committee. 13 items that were discussed at AC 33 are subject to a standalone document at this meeting and are indicated in the table in paragraph 31. 10 items that are not the subject to a standalone agenda item are described in more detail in paragraphs 32 to 79. A compilation of the draft decision agreed by the Animals Committee at AC 33 that are relevant to these 10 items are presented in Annex 2. Of these 10 items, I would like to highlight 6 items where the Standing Committee is invited to take some action. First, Joint CITES CMS African Carnivores Initiative. I would like to note the following cross-reference correction to be made. In paragraph 35, it should refer to paragraph 34A instead of paragraph 37A. The Standing Committee is invited to review and submit the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 13.3 for consideration to COP20, and the draft decision in Section A of Annex 2 that will be submitted by the Animals Committee for consideration at COP20. African lions. The Standing Committee is invited to review and submit the draft decisions in Section B of Annex 2 for consideration at COP20. On appropriate and acceptable destinations, the Standing Committee is invited to consider submitting a proposal to renew decisions 19164 to 19166 at COP20. On aquatic species listed in the appendices, the Standing Committee is invited to consider the workshop report taking into account the outcomes of AC33. On West African vultures, the Standing Committee is invited to review and submit the draft decisions in Section C of Annex 2 for consideration at COP20. And finally, on the review of Resolution Conf 813, Rev COP 19 on use of microchip implants for marking live animals in trade, the Standing Committee is invited to review and submit the draft decision in Section E of Annex 2 for consideration at COP20. Shall I continue with Section 3? Okay. Section 3 outlines the outcomes of the joint session of the 27th meeting of the Plans Committee and the 33rd meeting of the Animals Committee that are relevant to the Standing Committee. 11 items discussed at the joint meeting that are subject to a standalone document are indicated in the table in paragraph 80. 3 items that are not the subject to a standalone agenda item are described in more detail in paragraphs 81 to 91. A compilation of the draft decisions agreed by the Animals Committee and that are relevant to these 3 items are presented in Annex 3. So it's draft decision agreed by both committees, of course. Of these 3 items, I would like to highlight the countrywide significant trade review, where the Standing Committee is invited to review and submit the draft decisions in Section A of Annex 3 for consideration by COP20. I would also like to point out a minor error in relation to this item in the headings before paragraph 85 and Section A of Annex 3, where it currently refers to Decision 1872, where it should actually refer to this Decision 1948. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So on behalf of the Standing Committee, I wish to thank the chairs of the Animals and Plants Committee for their reports and congratulate the 2 committees for the considerable amount of work that they have done. In order to move us through this comprehensive document, I propose that we focus on the summary of the recommendations presented in paragraph 92. So ask you to look at paragraph 92 and work our way through this systematically. Also to consider is that these document has come from the ACPC member, many of us participated in those meetings. They've had extensive discussion, so what we're really looking for here is agreement or non-support and any substantive edits. I will pause on each item as I go through them to see if there are any comments. So we're doing it item by item. If nobody is asking for the floor, I will assume that you are in agreement with the recommendation. So in the interest of time, please only take the floor if you disagree with the recommendations or if you want to propose amendments and revisions. So this is the way I will proceed. It's quite a lengthy document, so I hope we can follow these instructions. So I will start with paragraph 92. The Standing Committee is invited to the first little a, paragraph little a, that we should be looking at the recommendations contained in this paragraph. So looking for standing committee members if they have any comments on this paragraph. Observer organizations. So then I can conclude, not hearing any comments, any disagreements, that the Standing Committee notes the recommendations in this paragraph. We will move on to little b, which requests the Secretariat, in consultation with the chairs of the Plants Committee and the Standing Committee, to revise the text, if required, on the CITES complementary actions presented in draft revisions to Resolution Comp 16.5 on cooperation with the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation, as was agreed to by the Plants Committee and contained in Section A in Annex 1 to the document 6, which was flagged to us by the Plants Committee Chair. So, looking for any disagreement with the recommendations here or revisions to the cooperation with Global Strategy for Plant Conservation. I open to standing committee members, and I have the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the North American region, we are in general agreement with this recommendation. However, we would propose an amendment. After further consultation with representatives of the Convention on Biological Diversity during CBD COP 16 this past October in Cali, Colombia, and based on the outcomes of said conference, we believe it is no longer necessary to retain the table that was the original annex in the original resolution, and we propose deleting it, since the potential contributions of CITES to the strategy's objectives are already adequately addressed in the other amendments to Resolution Conf 16.5. Thank you. This intervention was provided to the Secretariat. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I call on Poland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support the update presented in Annex 1 to the document, just with a minor suggestion. In Section A of this annex, on the document on the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation, page 16, we suggest to change provisional number of the decision to read Decision 16/20 from CBD COP. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other standing committee member wishing to speak? I have Brazil.
In this, we have a small amendment to the Annex 1, when it states that in the second paragraph, preambular, recalling, we think the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, last part of this paragraph, should be followed by adopted at the 15th session, 15th Conference of Parties of the CBD. This is because we don't think that the KM-GBF is an insulated agreement, and it's under the CBD. So this is our suggestion for this paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open the floor now to observer parties. Observer organizations. All right, I will consult now with the Secretariat on the proposed amendments we've heard to see the way forward. All right, I was just trying to get the exact wording of everything that happened. So what I propose is the Standing Committee agrees to submit to COP20 the text, the revisions to Resolution Comp 16.5 on cooperation with the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation, agreed to by the Plants Committee and as amended by North American region, Poland, and Brazil, and submits it to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Looking for Standing Committee, if I've got it right. Do I need to read it a second time? Not seeing anyone taking the floor, I think we have agreement on the way forward. All right. I will ask the Secretariat to read it one more time for me.
Thank you, Chair. The Standing Committee to submit the draft revisions to Resolution Conf 16.5 on cooperation with the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation agreed by the Plants Committee and contained in Section A in Annex 1 to the present document as amended by the USA, Poland, and Brazil. North America region, Poland and Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that clear? And I got thumbs up or nodding heads? Okay, we'll move on to the next section. C, little c, regarding the definition of the term appropriate and acceptable destinations. Noting the matters in paragraph 46 that were raised by representatives of Oceania, Australia, and Germany relating to transit and re-exports, the need for consultation with the management and scientific authorities of exporting countries, and on the possible need for clarification of the footnote in paragraph 1 in relation to provisions in paragraphs 1 and 2 of the resolution Conf 11.20. To refresh everyone's memory, paragraph 46 basically says the representative for Oceania, Australia, and Germany raised several questions that may not be accurately covered in the present guidance. Does appropriate and acceptable destinations requirements apply to transit countries for quarantine purposes? Shouldn't the guidance also encourage the importing parties to ask for support, views, and advice from management and scientific authorities of exporting parties? Does the guidance also apply to re-exports, especially in cases where both the exporter and importer are non-range states? Does the footnote in paragraph 1 of the resolution also apply to paragraph 2? So we're asking to renew the decisions 19.164 to 19.16 on the definition of the term appropriate and acceptable destinations. And basically, the recommendation is that the committee would request the Secretariat to consider the matters raised in paragraph 46 of document SC 78, document 6, in its report to the next regular meeting of the Animals Committee. So I'm looking for any substantive changes to the recommendations in this paragraph, or I'm looking for those that might disagree with it. I have the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm pressing the wrong button. On behalf of North America, we support renewing the decisions and concur that the questions raised by the representative for Oceania, Australia, and Germany highlight areas needing further clarification. While the guidance is generally accurate, some aspects require additional detail. We support efforts to address these clarifications. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other standing committee member wishing to speak? I'm really looking for disagreement. We've heard support. In this particular matter, I'll take silence, quiet, as supportive, and are really looking for any changes or disagreement with the recommendations in the paragraph. I'll open the floor to observer parties. Observer organizations. Therefore, not seeing any further discussion, I think our conclusion is that the Standing Committee basically agrees to renew decisions 19.164 to 19.166 on the definition of the term appropriate and acceptable destination, and we request the Secretariat to consider the matters raised in paragraph 46 of documents SC 78, document 6, in its report to the next regular meeting of the Animals Committee. Have I characterized the Standing Committee decision correctly? See nodding heads. Thank you. We'll move on to paragraph D. Regarding aquatic species listed in the CITES appendices, the Standing Committee is to consider the report of the workshop. See information document AC 33, IMP 13. They are to and note the recommendations in paragraph 51A and B, and agree that decisions 19.189 to 19.191 have been implemented and can be deleted. The Animals Committee agreed to the following recommendations in paragraph 10, A through C of document AC 33, document 30. The Animals Committee noted the background document prepared by the Secretariat on the viability of life history parameters and productivity in Elismo branch and other commercially exploited aquatic species. And the Animals Committee invited the Secretariat to consider including information on the application of footnote 2 to commercially exploited aquatic species when developing general capacity building materials on Resolution Conf 9.24, Rev Cop 17, on criteria for amendment of Appendices 1 and 2. So I'm looking for discussion on little paragraph D. Standing Committee members first. Moving on to observer parties. Moving on to observer organizations. Not hearing any comments, I think our conclusion is that the Standing Committee takes note of the report of the workshop, notes the recommendations of the Animals Committee in paragraph 51A and B, and agrees that decisions 19.189 to 19.191 have been implemented and can be deleted. Looking for Standing Committee agreement. Seeing thumbs up. We'll move on to the next one, which is subparagraph E. Before opening this one to the floor, I'd like to remind the committee that these decisions are for noting as they will be submitted directly to the COP by the relevant scientific committee. So there are a number of items under our consideration in paragraph E. And I note the draft decision and amendments to resolutions that the 27th meeting of the Plants Committee and the 33rd meeting of the Animals Committee agreed to submit for consideration by the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties are contained in Annexes 1 and 2 to document SC 78 Document 6. So we're talking about Annex 1 and 2. I'll take these one by one. The first item under consideration is rosewood tree species, which has new draft decisions in Section D of Annex 1. I'm looking to see standing committees first if there is any proposed revisions or disagreement with these draft decisions that essentially were done by the technical committee. Let me do these one by one. All right, in the essence of time, I guess there are a number of items under consideration, and the Secretariat is saying don't have to consider them one by one. I guess so. It's rosewood tree species, conservation of amphibians, queen conch, periodic review of the appendices, and non-detriment findings. And the Standing Committee is asked to note these draft decisions, just note them, unless there are amendments and amendments to the resolutions presented in the table in subparagraph E of paragraph 92. So unless there's any disagreement or additional edits to the decisions that have come from the Animals and Plants Committee, I open the floor to the Standing Committee members. I open it to party observer parties. Open it to observer organizations. Not seeing any comments, then the Standing Committee, I conclude the Standing Committee notes the draft decisions and amendments to the resolutions presented in the table in subparagraph E of paragraph 92. Now we move on to little f. So I would like to turn our attention to subparagraph F and the list of 8 items in the table. As the committee is invited to review the draft decisions and amendments to the resolutions proposed by the scientific committees, I will go through each item in the table one at a time, and I will pause to see if there are any comments. If nobody is asking for the floor, I will assume that you are in agreement with the proposed text as presented in the relevant section and annex indicated in the table. If you want to take the floor, please indicate at the start of your intervention if you are proposing minor editorial amendments, which is sort of discouraging, or if you propose amendments that are more substantive. And I would like to remind you that if your comments are complex or lengthy, I hope you have submitted them in writing as information documents to ensure clarity and efficient discussion here. It's quite a lot. So the first item in the table is the identification of timber and other wood products, and proposed recommendation to the Standing Committee is new and revised draft decisions in Section B of Annex 1. So anyone wishing to speak to the identification of timber and other wood products in terms of proposing an amendment or something substantive? I turn to Standing Committee members first. I will turn to observer parties. And then I will turn to observer organizations. Not seeing any comments, then the Standing Committee agrees to the new and revised draft decision in Section B of Annex 1 for identification of timber and other wood products. Next item under consideration is Aga Wood Producing Taxa, Decision 19.240. And the recommendation to the Standing Committee is proposed amendments to Resolution Comp 16.10 on the implementation of the Convention for Aga Wood Producing Taxa in Section C of Annex 1. So I open the floor to Standing Committee members if they have any changes to the Aga Wood proposed amendments. I will look to observer parties. Observer organizations. Then I think we can, not hearing any comments, the Standing Committee can agree to the proposed amendments to Resolution Comp 16.10 on implementation of the Convention for Aga Wood Producing Taxa in Section C of Annex 1. Next item under consideration is the Joint CITES CMS African Carnivores Initiative, Decision 19.25. The proposed recommendation to the Standing Committee is a proposed amendment to paragraph 1B of Resolution Comp 13.3 on cooperation and synergy with the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, CMS, in Section A, little I of Annex 2, and then there are new draft decisions in Section A, little I of Annex 2. I open it up to Standing Committee members. Then I will move on to observer parties. Observer organizations, and the Standing Committee agrees to these proposed amendments to paragraph 1B of Resolution Comp 13.3 on the cooperation and synergy with CMS in Section A, little 1 of Annex 2, and agrees to the submission of the new draft decisions in Section A, little I of Annex 2. Move on to African lions, Panthera leo, Decision 19.207. And for our recommendation to the Standing Committee is to look at the draft revised decisions in Section B of Annex 2. So African lions, I open up to the Standing Committee members. Moving on to observer parties. Observer organizations. Not seeing comments, I take agreement to the draft revised decisions in Section B of Annex 2. Moving on to the definition of the term appropriate and acceptable destinations, Decision 19.166. And essentially, the Standing Committee is to agree to the renewal of Decisions 19.164 to 19.166 on the definition of the term appropriate and acceptable destinations. I open the floor to Standing Committee members. Observer parties. Observer organizations. I will conclude that the Standing Committee agrees to the renewal of decisions 19.164 to 19.166 on definition of the term appropriate and acceptable destinations. Next item for us to consider is West African vultures, decision 19.196, and the Standing Committee is asked to consider, agree to the draft revised decisions in Section C of Annex 2. I open the floor to Standing Committee members. Observer parties, observer organizations, I conclude that the Standing Committee agrees to the draft revised decisions in Section C of Annex 2. Next item of consideration is the review of Resolution Comp 8.13, Rev Cop 17, on the use of coded microchip implants for marking live animals in trade. And the item for us to consider is new draft decisions in Section E of Annex 2. I turn to Standing Committee members. Observer parties, observer organizations, and the last item for us to consider, I conclude that the Standing Committee agrees to the new draft decisions in Section E of Annex 2. The last item on this list is the countrywide significant trade reviews, decision 18.72, and the Standing Committee is asked to agree to the new draft decisions in Section A of Annex 3, and I open the floor to Standing Committee members. Observer parties, observer organizations, so not hearing any disagreements or amendments, there are no proposed revisions, so the Standing Committee agrees to the draft decisions and amendments to resolutions proposed by the 27th meeting of the Plants Committee and the 33rd meeting of the Animals Committee as presented in the relevant sections of Annex 1 to 3 for the items listed in the table subparagraph F of paragraph 92. And I look to the Standing Committee for agreement, acceptance of that conclusion. I am seeing nodding heads. Oh, I have the USA.
Oh, apologies. We're going to still do a paragraph G, recommendation G, I'm wondering, and then, okay, there is an item related to periodic review that I didn't want to interrupt the proceedings, but perhaps I could mention that afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to get to paragraph G. I was trying to finish this one up, and I appreciate everyone's patience and consensus with me. Okay, paragraph G. Paragraph G is essentially agreeing that the following decisions directed to the Standing Committee relating to the items in document SC 78, Doc 6, have been implemented and can be deleted. Up for deletion, first one is decision 19.240 on agarwood producing taxa, decision 19.25 on rosewood tree species, decision 19.256 on African tree species, decision 19.260 on neotropical species, decision 18.258, Rev Cop 19 on songbird trade and conservation management. And those are the decisions we're proposing to delete, and I know the U.S. has something on periodic review, so you can bring it up now. I look for comments from the Standing Committee members on the deletion of those decisions and anything else related to paragraph G. I see the U.S.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of North America, I would like to say that we do support recommendation G. I didn't want to disrupt the discussion during a couple of the periodic review items to just ask another question on behalf of our region. This is, of course, related to the periodic review, which is one of the pillars of the convention to ensure that species are included in the correct appendices. We would like to ask the Secretariat if they have explored alternative ways to fund and undertake this important task for the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I will ask the Secretariat to respond to that.
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, the Secretariat does not have alternative ways to fund this work, so we welcome any suggestions from the parties or members from the Standing Committee. So it will remain subject to external resources to enable us to undertake the work. Thank you.
Any other Standing Committee members wishing to speak to the deletion of these decisions or have creative ways for funding periodic review processes in the future? I open the floor to Standing Committee members. Observer parties. Observer organizations. In which case, I will conclude that the Standing Committee agrees that decisions 19.240 on agawood producing taxa, 19.25 on rosewood tree species, 19.256 on African tree species, 19.260 on neotropical tree species, Decision 18.258, Rev Cop 19 on songbird trade and conservation management have been implemented and can be deleted. And we will note in the executive summary, the comment from or in the lengthier summary, the comment by the North American region on the need for external funding to do periodic reviews. With that, I can conclude the discussion of this document. This was the one that scared me the most because it was so complex, and I really appreciate your patience and spirit of cooperation on this. And I think the Animals Committee and Plants Committee did a very extensive job on this and provided us with good decisions based on that we didn't have many comments. So thank you. Next on our agenda, which is document 15, the role of CITES in reducing the risk of future zoonotic disease emergence associated with international wildlife trade, decision 19.17, SC 78 document 15. The recommendations are contained in paragraph 16 of this document, and I call upon the working group chair, Singapore, to introduce document 15.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document was submitted by Israel and Singapore as co-chairs of the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group on the role of CITES in reducing risks of future zoonotic disease emergence associated with international wildlife trade. The mandate of this working group is listed in paragraph 2 of this present document. The Standing Committee is invited to acknowledge the working group's consensus that there is no need for the establishment of a CITES advisory body to provide guidance to parties and to note that no consensus was reached on the need for a new resolution on One Health. The Standing Committee is invited to establish an in-session working group to review the recommendations from AC 33 for approval by the Standing Committee. The intention of the working group is to reorganize the points to make a decision, and also to agree that paragraphs A and B of Decision 19.17 have been implemented by the Standing Committee, and to propose renewal of paragraphs C and D of the decision by the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I call on the other co-chair of the working group, Israel.
Thank you, Chair. We worked as co-chairs, Singapore and Israel, on this issue, and Singapore has just now presented the outcome of the first part of our mandate. The second part of our mandate from Decision 19.17 is in paragraph C and D of that decision. In short, our mandate was to explore whether there is a need for a new CITES resolution related to the One Health approach. I think it's important to briefly remind everyone what is the One Health approach and how it relates to CITES and the prevention of zoonotic diseases. The One Health approach is defined as an integrated, unifying approach that aims to sustainably balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and ecosystems. This simply means that we should take into consideration simultaneously the health of the environment as well as the health of animals and of people, since they are all interrelated. The One Health approach has been endorsed by IUCN, the World Health Organization, FAO, UNEP, and it's also included in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. In the context of CITES, a One Health approach means that we need to remember that close contact between humans and live animals during wildlife trade can lead to the spread of zoonotic diseases due to pathogen spillover. CITES is certainly not the only multinational body that is responsible to prevent the next zoonotic pandemic. But the members of the working group unanimously agreed that a One Health approach is important when dealing with international wildlife trade and should be incorporated into policies and actions at the national as well as the multilateral and international levels. In terms of a new CITES resolution on One Health, the working group reviewed a zero draft of a possible One Health resolution, and that appears in Annex 2 of the working group report. And the comments on it are in an INF document 12, but the working group did not take this issue further. Finally, the working group did not have time to complete the second part of our mandate on the issue of the One Health resolution. Therefore, the working group proposes to the Standing Committee to ask COP20 to renew paragraphs C and D on Decision 1917 to carry out the work on a possible One Health resolution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I open the floor to the Standing Committee members for comments on document 15, and I will remind us Standing Committee members have 3 minutes and party observers have 2 minutes. Really speak to the recommendations in paragraph 16. Thank you. I call on the USA.
Thank you. The United States is under a new administration. We are not able to take a position on this matter at this time. This is without prejudice or to our ability to express positions on this matter in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other Standing Committee members requesting to speak? I've got Brazil.
Thank you. Brazil agrees that the advisory body is not necessary at this stage. As for Annex 1, we carefully studied the text, and we would be supportive of the idea of the creation of the in-session working group. However, regarding the proposal to discuss the resolution One Health and CITES, we recognize the importance of the discussion, but at this point we believe that the text is too prescriptive, extensive, and at some point cumbersome to be discussed thoroughly. We suggest that this text should be rewritten in a document much shorter, with a view of creating a non-binding suggestion to the countries, in line with the current discussions in the World Organization of Animal Health, and to be present in the next standing committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Other standing committee members? Observer parties? Oh. I have of Cambodia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Related to this agenda item, Cambodia would like to propose that the text is only one side off, which is One Health. Currently and globally, we streamline to the global health security, which is all the health-related components have been addressed. So One Health is one of the subset of the global health security. So in this regard, as a colleague from Brazil said, this text should be revised and in accordance to the new development of the process related to the global health security. Thank you.
I call upon the European Union. Europe.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the EU and its member states. So we do acknowledge the documents mentioned in Recommendation A, and we support the conclusion in Recommendation B, that there is no need for an advisory body. Concerning Recommendation E, the EU and its member states could agree to the suggestion to continue the working group efforts after COP20. With regard to the Recommendation D, we do support many of the Animals Committee suggestions. However, we do have some concerns with a number of them, in particular communication portal, or the Animals Committee capacity and mandate to develop guidelines for standard operating procedures for wildlife health surveillance, as well as the inclusion of transport guidelines, and the reference to reviewing CITES permitting systems with regard to health risks. We wonder whether it's really necessary to have that in-session working group, or whether these issues could be addressed here in plenary, but then we will of course align with the decision, and we can also bring up those points if there is a working group. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now open it up to other observer parties. Then observer organizations, and I have a request from, I have a party now, Mexico.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mexico would like to reassert its commitment to the One Health approach and its incorporation into CITES work. We would highlight the need to strengthen our consideration of One Health within the Convention. This would enable us to have a cross-cutting way of approaching the risk associated with wildlife trade. We think that this matter should be considered further within CITES so that we can ensure that we do take One Health on board in our work and in our decisions. We must ensure that everything we decide is entirely in keeping with the approach of other international, other MEAs, including UNEP, where there have been resolutions adopted that recognize the relation between human and animal health and the environment. And we should also bear in mind the World Health Organization negotiations on pandemics. We need to stress how important it is to have international interinstitutional cooperation in order to ensure that we prevent zoonotic disease that is the result of wildlife trade. This in keeping with CBD as well as other MEAs. We would urge CITES parties to ensure that One Health is part and parcel of our work, and that we take full advantage of the scientific information available and a precautionary approach. We endorse this document and would be interested in participating in the work of any working group that might be set up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other observer parties wishing to speak? I will turn then to observer organizations. I've got quite a number of observer organizations wishing to speak on this. I will remind you to be brief, concise, and align yourself with previous speakers, getting many observer organizations. So I will pick some in the essence of time because I think I'm hearing some conclusions. FAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. FAO collaborates with the Secretariat on various topics that interact with FAO's mandate, as will be showcased in other agenda items of this meeting. We are very pleased to continue strengthening this partnership in support of an enhanced implementation of the CITES regime by FAO members that are parties to CITES, and we stand ready to clarify questions relating to FAO's cooperation with the Secretariat. On this agenda item, FAO would like to commend the Secretariat and the Working Group for their work in integrating the One Health approach, particularly in developing the draft resolution. Noting FAO's work as a member of the quadripartite in supporting global governance of One Health, we encourage parties to use the full definition of One Health developed by the One Health High-Level Expert Panel and supported by the quadripartite, as well as to utilize the recently developed publication Zoonotic Spillover by the One Health High-Level Expert Panel. We would like to be included in the discussions related to agenda item 15, as there are other technical issues that FAO would like to raise for consideration of the members of the working group. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next on my list is the World Organization of Animal Health.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. As it's the first intervention of the World Organization for Animal Health, I would like to thank the Switzerland government for their hospitality and the CITES Standing Secretariat and the staff involved for the organization of this 78th Standing Committee. We would like to suggest in the SC 78 Doc 15, page 4, item 16, the Standing Committee is invited to, sub-item A, acknowledge the following to add, to include a new point, which is the general guidelines for surveillance of disease, pathogen, and toxic agents in free-ranging wildlife, released by WUA in September 2024. We think also that instead of an advisory body, CITES should rely on the expertise of the quadripartite regarding this issue of zoonosis. And regarding the draft resolution, and to reflect this position, we would like to highlight the suggested change as specified in the page 19 of the SC 78 information document 12 revised 1. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I have several observer organizations wishing to speak on this. I have at least 4, and I think 2 of them may be similar and the other 2 may be similar. So I have either Born Free or WCS. Could you decide among yourselves which one of you wants to speak? And then the other 2 observer organizations are the Wildlife Ranching of South Africa and the Sustainable Use Coalition of South Africa. Again, I would ask you to choose which one of you will speak, but I think that will give us views from both spectrums, and then I would like to really get to conclusion on this because I feel I will be striking a working group on this. So, is it Born Free or Wildlife Conservation Society? Can one of you take off your request so I know who will speak? We're really, I'm trying to be fair, but time is of the essence. Okay, I have the Wildlife Conservation Society.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I have no idea what Born Free was going to say, but I'll try to hopefully read their minds. We're very pleased to have been a member of the working group. We will avoid all the thank yous. The extensive scientific information and data now available are clear what is needed to prevent the next pandemic of zoonotic origin. And we particularly support the interventions we've just heard from the distinguished delegates of Mexico and WOA, the World Organization of Animal Health. Regarding the recommendations in the document, we recommend the Standing Committee not only acknowledge the WOA guidelines and the CBD Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health, but rather the Standing Committee welcome these 2 important documents, which are very relevant to CITES implementation. We support the recommendation that there's no need for the establishment of an advisory body, but we urge CITES parties to implement the guidance produced by WOA that we've just heard and the CBD action plan. Your governments all adopted that at the CBD COP in Cali, and it has excellent guidance on biodiversity and One Health. We're disappointed that no consensus could be reached on the matter of a new resolution. We agree that what was included in the document could be streamlined. We appreciate the draft as a starting point and look forward to working with any interested parties on development of a resolution for the COP. Finally, we support the recommendation to establish an in-session working group here to review the recommendations of the Animals Committee, and we look forward to joining it. And I apologize if there were things that Born Free wanted to say that I wasn't aware of. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, WCS and Born Free. I have now the Sustainable Use Coalition of South Africa.
I have no idea.
I just wanted the resolution. I know.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would just thank my colleague from Wildlife Ranching for handing it over to me. Madam Chair, I think we'd like to focus on the fact that pandemics historically, from antiquity, are actually spread by people, not the animals itself. The animal jump is usually at a local level. CITES has limited direct influence on an even more limited number of taxa on a global scale. But most importantly, any initiative seized by CITES should be directly in the core mandate of the convention. The discussion on the budget this morning, I think, is the exact lesson why. And budget constraints are not just at the secretariat level. They flow into many parties, departments, as well as the working NGOs that attend CITES and work behind the scenes. We would all need to create capacity to deal with this new arm, which is not our core business anywhere amongst any of the parties or the departments within parties or the NGOs present here. We'd need to create that extra capacity. So your knock-on budget effect would be massive if you were to do more than what has already been ably done by the likes of the World Organization of Animal Health, the World Health Organization, and others. It is a priority for those organizations, and their presence in CITES is essential for their work. But it should not be a reversal of that. It should not be CITES's prime or even peripheral core to go and do things at that level. But certainly they being here makes a lot of sense, as it's their core business. And that is what we would propose most certainly, is that we do as little as possible, but absolutely what is necessary in this regard at the CITES level. Thank you.
Thank you. In particular, some have suggested proposed amendments to the resolution, which is in an INF document, and just as a matter under our rules of procedure, they are not the subject of discussion, and therefore, basically your comments should be considered by the authors of that information document for the future, but we're not going to discuss it here in the Standing Committee. So I would like to sort of summarize where I think we have come to on this agenda item. I have Israel asking to speak.
Yes, thank you. Just now, as Israel and not as chair of the co-chair of this working group, we would like to adopt the recommendation by WCS in 16A and to welcome these documents, not just acknowledge them. And we would encourage that text change, please.
All right, so in conclusion, basically the Standing Committee, I'm asking the Standing Committee to consider basically first welcome and acknowledge the following documents. Little I, the Memorandum of Understanding between the CITES Secretariat and WOHA, signed on March 2024. Little I, the guidelines for addressing disease risks in wildlife trade, released by WOHA in May 2024. And the third item, the Global Action Plan for Biodiversity and Health, which was approved recently by the Convention of Biological Diversity at its 16th Conference of the Parties, Cali, Colombia, November 2024. Also, the Standing Committee would agree that there is no need for the establishment of the CITES advisory body to provide guidance based on the best available science to parties in their efforts to reduce the risk of zoonotic pathogen spillover and transmission from wildlife trade and associated wildlife supply chains, including markets. Also, the Standing Committee would note that there was no consensus reached by the working group on the matter of a new resolution on One Health. And lastly, they would agree that paragraphs A and B of Decision 1917 have been implemented by the Standing Committee, and propose renewal of paragraphs C and D of the decision by the 20th Conference of the Parties is what I heard suggested. And then lastly, I would establish an in-session working group here to review the recommendations from AC 33 presented in Annex 1 of this report, so that that work could be completed and approved by the Standing Committee. I would read the terms of reference for that working group after I have agreement from the Standing Committee on these 5 things on the way forward. So I look to the Standing Committee members for reaction to what I've proposed. If I'm not seeing any comments, I guess I'm looking for some agreement by thumbs up or nodding heads. I'm seeing agreement on the way forward. So I will proceed then to establish an in-session working group. And the terms of reference for this in-session working group would be to review the recommendations from AC 33 presented in Annex 1 of document SC 78, document 15, and prepare recommendations for consideration by the Standing Committee, including, if appropriate, a draft decision for consideration at COP20. Should I repeat the terms of reference for the working group again? Review the recommendations from AC 33 presented in Annex 1 of document SC 78, document 15, and prepare recommendations for consideration by the Standing Committee, including, if appropriate, a draft decision for consideration by COP 20. So I'm now looking for a Standing Committee member to chair that working group, and also I will open up membership then to this working group, first to the Standing Committee members and then calling on others. Who's going to chair this? Do I have a volunteer to chair this working group, or can I ask Singapore to, oh, I have Israel.
Yes, Chair, as Singapore and I have discussed this before, and we would be happy to be joint co-chairs of this if that's agreeable to the chair. Okay? Thank you.
Yes, that is agreeable to, that you can continue your work since you're familiar with the topic. So Israel and Singapore will co-chair this working group. Now I'm looking for membership in this working group from Standing Committee members first. I've got a request from Kazakhstan, but I haven't opened to parties yet. Kazakhstan, are you requesting to join the group? Because I'll get to that in a moment. I just wanted to see if there were any Standing Committee members who want to be in the working group. I've got Poland. I've got the UK, I've got Brazil. Basically push your button and that'll show up on the screen, and I take that as you want to be a member. My eyesight's a little poor to see just hands. Okay, so the Standing Committee members will be Poland, UK, and Brazil. I now open the floor. Did I miss someone? Okay, I now open the floor to observer parties to join the working group here. I've got Gabon, Canada, Australia, Germany, the EU. I have Kazakhstan. I'm learning how to scroll this when I get lots of people. Mexico, China, Peru, Cambodia. I think that's the end of parties. And then I open it up to observer organizations. And remember, we need to have a balance, basically, more parties than observer organizations. So, well, okay, I have EAZA, well, wait. Can I please ask the parties that joined the working group to turn off their buttons so we can deal with the observer organizations? Okay, observer organizations, I have Born Free, AZA, IFF, IWMC, European Association of Zoological Zoos and Aquariums, okay, it's scrolling fast now, CIC, WCS, Traffic, IUCN, Pet Advocacy, FACE, WOHA, FAO, San Diego Zoo, UNEP, WAZA, Center for Biological Diversity, the Sustainable Use Coalition of South Africa, Wildlife Ranching of South Africa, World Wildlife Fund, PASA, and the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. I will check with the Secretariat, but I do think we have more observer organizations, so let me see what the count is.
I do. Let me just check.
Can I ask everyone to please undo their buttons? We'll need to have some negotiations here. I also had the bio research. Anyway, we would have 24 observer organizations and only 15 parties. So I would ask for the observer organizations to take a few minutes, and some of you remove yourselves from this working group where you're aligned with others that have similar interests, because we cannot have more observer organizations than parties per our rules of procedure. And so I will ask again on the observer organizations, hoping that I will now get a more reasonable list. So if you want to be in the working group as an observer organization, you've had time to caucus with each other. As I said in my opening remarks, cooperation would be greatly appreciated. So observer organizations, can you basically repress your button to be in the working group? Okay, I have now 13, which I think would be acceptable. So I have Born Free, WCS, the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, Pet Advocacy, Bioresearch, CIC, not sure what that one is yet, Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, FAO, WOHA, AZA, UNEP, IFF, the Sustainable Use Coalition of South Africa, WRSA, and that would give us 13 and 15 parties, and that would be acceptable. I will repeat the list of observer organizations, so keep your button on. I had 13, so I have Born Free, WCS, the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, CIC, FAO, WOHA, UNEP, IFF, the Sustainable Use Coalition of South Africa, WRSA, Pet Advocacy, Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, AZA, and Bioresearch. So that's 14. I will stop there because we have 15 parties. And the chair, the co-chairs are Israel and Singapore, and they're counted in my tally of parties. So again, the working group has been struck, and you will get instructions as to when you will be meeting, probably sometime tomorrow. Thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is item 23, the Compliance Assistance Program. Okay. We're cleaning the screen so we can move on to the next item. Okay, the next item is document 23, Compliance Assistant Program, Decision 19.46. And I turn to the Secretariat to give us an introduction to this document.
Wait.
No? Oh,
Start with 23.
no, my apologies, I jumped ahead again. We're on document 16. And I turn to the Secretariat to introduce document 16.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. The document summarizes the progress on the implementation of decisions on the cooperation with MEAs and other international organizations. It presents a revised draft CITES partnership strategy and the Secretariat's clarifications on comments made by parties and observer organizations. The Standing Committee is invited to propose to COP20 the incorporation of Decision 1755 into Resolution Conf 16.4 on cooperation of CITES with other biodiversity-related conventions, and to review and submit the draft CITES partnership strategy for approval at COP20. Thank you, Chair.
I open the discussion to the Standing Committee to provide comments on the recommendations in paragraph 32 of this document. I have Poland.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We appreciate the efforts to develop a partnership strategy and strengthen cooperation with other multilateral environmental agreements. As regards recommendation A, we suggest that the draft partnership strategy undergo further revision before its submission for approval by COP20, taking into account the following concerns. The strategy appears to focus more on cooperation with industry than cooperation with other multilateral environmental agreements, whereas the latter should always be the core element of work on synergies. Expanding the scope of the strategy to include new areas may add to the already high burden of the Secretariat, potentially detracting from its core responsibilities. In our view, before approving such a broad strategy, it is essential to ensure that it is party-driven and that there is a clear process for parties to contribute to and approve partnerships, similar to the process used in the past for partnerships with organizations like the FAO. These concerns should be addressed to ensure that the strategy aligns with the objectives of the Convention and the mandate of the decisions. As regards recommendation B and D, we agree with the proposal to delete decisions 1920, 1921 and 1756 as they have been implemented. Given the above reservations, we oppose recommendation E to incorporate decision 1755 into resolution 16.4 at this time. As regards recommendation C, we take note on the update by the Secretariat on the strengthening of cooperation and synergies. At the same time, we'd like to emphasize the importance of maintaining sufficient autonomy and flexibility for CITES to fulfill its specific mandate while pursuing synergies with other multilateral environmental agreements. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have Kenya, then followed by Brazil.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like Poland, Kenya has looked at the substance of this discussion, and we consider that what we are looking at is cooperation with multilateral environmental agreements and the other international organizations. Madam Chair, in para 5 of this document, while we acknowledge that the mandate given under Decision 19.20 is to develop a strategic partnership. We are not considering it as without any limit. We consider that the limit should be within the mandate of the CITES Convention. And we note that the partnership strategy goes beyond that mandate. So it is in our view that we could present the progress in implementation of Decision 19.20, but further discussion should be undertaken in the sessional working group before it can be considered or for consideration. But we don't agree or we don't support that this draft decision, the partnership strategy, be presented for consideration of the COP at its 20th meeting. Maybe later, but not now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I turn to Brazil.
Thank you very much. We share some of the concerns that were raised by Poland and Kenya. We have small edits related to something that I said previously on the coming Montreal Global Framework, which also should be in the first appearance followed by adopted at the 15th Conference of Parties of the CBD. Then afterwards, on the second, third, and so on, we can use the acronym that is KMGBF. So this will be our suggestion regarding the text, if this is to go forward. We also would like to mention that in our national capacity, this I just mentioned in national capacity, but this following it in is also national capacity. We are also would like to have more formal channel of dialogue between CITES Convention and the Convention of the Inter-American Convention for Turtles. We think this is important since the convention, Inter-American Convention on Turtles also deals with the turtles and here in CITES. So we think CITES and CITES could have a very profitable dialogue on that regard. So we suggest that the Secretariat could try to reach out the convention, the Inter-American Convention on Turtles as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We consider cooperation and synergies with other biodiversity-related agreements and processes extremely important to ensure success in achieving nature conservation and sustainable development goals. We would like to thank the Secretariat for the work carried out under this agenda item, including preparation of the draft partnership strategy. We will carefully consider the strategy before COP meeting, while at this stage we can agree with the recommendations to submit it to COP. We can also agree with the proposal made by the EU. We also share the view that cooperation and synergies at the national level is the most effective tool in this process. Therefore, even though the suggested amendment in paragraph 1 of the resolution conf 60.4 sounds a bit duplicative of paragraph 2 of the same resolution, we could support the suggested amendment as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I look to see if there's any other standing committee members. I know Benin has pressed their button, but I haven't turned to observer parties yet. Any other standing committee members wishing to speak on this one? I will open the floor to parties and have Benin, the USA, and Mexico. I guess the USA will go first as a standing committee member, and then I'll turn to the parties, Benin, Mexico, and Senegal.
I'll be speaking on behalf of the United States. The United States is under a new administration. We are not able to take a position on this matter at this time. This is without prejudice to our ability to express positions on this matter in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to Benin, Mexico. Benin first, and then Mexico.
Okay. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to thank the Secretariat for having drafted this document. We agree with those who have already taken the floor on this, Kenya among others. In addition to what has already been said, we think that to adopt this strategy at the COP would require additional human and financial resources. If you consider the challenges that CITES is already facing, this seems to us to be an additional burden, which is why it should be postponed until the next intersessional phase of our work. That would give us the opportunity to discuss this matter and to concentrate on more urgent matters at the next COP rather than addressing this. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to Mexico.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mexico would like to thank the Secretariat for this document, which considers the partnership strategy. We would say that we have responded to the notification and are comparable with what is in paragraphs 13 and 14. They're not reflected in the relevant documentation, particularly paragraphs 13 and 14. This includes an analysis of the current partnership situation, what types of partnerships, associations, and agreements that we have, the role of parties, the COP and committees, the budgetary implications in detail, practical advantages with respect to the implementation of the convention, as well as conclusions and next steps. In this respect, we would say that this is information that is important to underpin any decision to be taken on this strategy, and we therefore think it's too early to put this proposal to the parties, to the COP as it now stands. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I turn to other parties, I will look to the Secretariat because apparently there is in their introduction, there is an addendum to this document that also needs our consideration. So I'll turn to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. The Secretariat appreciates the opportunity to also draw your attention to the addendum document to item 16, so Doc 16 add, which includes an additional information and proposed steps in preparation of UNFF 20 as it relates to collaboration with CPF, Collaborative Partnership on Forests. On the basis of the information provided, we are proposing an additional recommendation F to be considered as part of this document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will continue to call on parties. I have Senegal, followed then by Niger, and then Argentina. And then I'll sort of see where I'm getting a sense in the room. Senegal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to congratulate the Secretariat for this document which has been made available to parties. I do have some concerns, however. They are comparable to those of Kenya. I think that taking account of partners in the private or financial sector would involve working with people who might not share our goals. CITES, yes, is about trade, but it is also about conservation. it is not clear to us that our partners would share our concerns with conservation issues. And that is why agreements with them could be detrimental to our objectives. That is why we feel that this document should not be submitted to the COP. We should rather invite the COP to consider this whole question intersessionally and also see how we might work with our future partners on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Cognizant of the time, so I will give the floor to two parties remaining, Niger and Argentina, and then I'll pause and try to sum this up where I get a sense we're heading. Niger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, would like to congratulate the Secretariat on the excellent work done on this document. We support the statements made by Senegal, Kenya, and Benin with respect to this document. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Argentina.
Thank you, Madam. We would like to say that, like many other speakers, we think that decisions on partnerships not incorporate areas that others work on that are not directly part of our concerns. If you consider this, we would like to say that we do believe in the need to protect all individual rights that are enshrined in a number of different international agreements. And we would agree that, remind everyone that Agenda 2030 is made up of non-binding language. We would prefer to see references to such documents deleted from this document or to provide some explanatory language as to the non-binding nature of these references. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now consult with the Secretariat and take a pause. Okay, I think having heard the sense in the room, I again draw our attention to the recommendations in paragraph 32. I did not hear support, particularly from standing committee members, to submit at this time to COP20 the draft partnership strategy. What I did hear was the discussion that more work continue on this intercessionally between COP20 and COP21 probably. So I would propose that we change recommendation B, which called for the deletions of these decisions, to be proposed to the conference of the party. The standing committee agrees to propose to the conference of the parties the renewal of the decisions 19.20 and 19.21. So instead of deleting them as completed, this would basically accomplish what Poland and others, Kenya, have suggested, that this work be postponed. Then, in terms of recommendation C, I think the Standing Committee agrees to note the update provided by the Secretariat in order to strengthen cooperation, collaboration, and synergies with other MEAs and international organizations, taking into account some of the comments heard here where others suggested, as Brazil did, the Inter-American Convention on the Conservation of Turtles, and there were some other suggestions. So they take note of that, those comments made. And then we go to recommendation D, which I heard no discussion of, that the Standing Committee agrees that with the amendments to Resolution Comp 6.4 on cooperation of CITES with other biodiversity-related conventions proposed in document SC 78, document 14 on the CITES strategic vision, decision 17.56, Rev Cop 19 has been implemented and can be proposed for deletion at the COP. And then basically on recommendation E, I know that Poland had opposed that specific recommendation, so I don't think we can agree to incorporate decision 17.55 in resolution comp 6.4 as shown below in the underlying text of that decision. And then I'm reminded that we still have the addendum, which was read out by the Secretariat, which is to request the Secretariat, in consultation with the Chair of the Standing Committee, to finalize a response to the letter received from the Chair of the 20th session of the United Nations Forum on Forests, using as a basis addendum SC 78 Doc 16 addendum, as well as any relevant feedback from our discussion here. That one seems to need to be done, and I didn't hear any opposition to that. So that's basically where I think we are on all of this, but I look to the Standing Committee members for any comments or disagreement with how I've proposed this. I have Brazil.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you please repeat what is the number C? Sorry, I didn't get what is the relation with the CITES Convention, how it's going to be reflected in the text. And on the item 5 in the addendum, I think that we need to discuss the item 19 on sites and forests before we move ahead. Brazil has many concerns on that specific topic, and including the global forest commitments, which is mentioned in this UNFF letter. We don't agree with that definition. So there are many things to be discussed. So at this point, I think we cannot have all the elements to send a response to the UNFF. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Any other Standing Committee members requesting to speak? I will repeat C for Brazil. So C was just for the Standing Committee to note the update provided by the CITES Secretariat in order to strengthen cooperation, collaboration, and synergies with other MEAs and international organizations. So it is just to note. I have Brazil.
Yep, I think that we could, as we requested before, we could including the Inter-American Convention on the Protection of Turtles. So this would include our request, if you could add this text, including the IAC Convention. Thank you.
do that?
All right, we can, CITES Secretariat is telling me we can take that into account. So any other standing committee members wishing to speak to this? All right, one correction to my summary is recommendation in paragraph 32E, proposed to the COP to incorporate decision 17.55 into resolution COP 16.4. As shown below, the new text is underlined and deleted text is shown in strike through, and subsequently delete decision 17.55. If I understood correctly, I thought Poland had said they oppose it, but that's only one member of the standing committee, and I haven't looked to the other standing committee members what their decision is on little paragraph E. Not hearing from anyone else, I think that we can, the standing committee can agree to little paragraph E. Give you a minute to reflect on that. I'm looking for nods. I see some. Okay, I think that not seeing anyone wanting to speak, I think standing committee agrees to little paragraph E, and I guess I would like to have some further discussion of the addendum, because particularly since UNFF reached out to the standing committee chair, and I said I would take input from the standing committee members at this meeting to give them a response. And I know Brazil would like to table this till we discuss CITES and forests. I have Kenya.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Okay, thank you, Chair. We agree that decision 17.55 could be brought to resolution 16.4 because it's work continuing, and we consider that to continue. And instead of coming to COP20 and say we revise decision 17.55 because it will have already, the implementation period will have already fully expired, we consider that is be incorporated in the resolution 16.4 on cooperation of CITES with other biodiversity-related conventions, and encourage parties that they undertake cooperation and coordination and building synergies at the national level to have effective implementation of the convention and other MES. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Canada.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for guiding us through this document. And we agree with your conclusions thus far. Regarding the addendum, we note that the addendum was posted quite late, and so we have not had a fulsome opportunity to think about some advice to provide in terms of the request being made in that addendum. However, we do tend to agree with Brazil that this is linked to the discussion on CITES and forests, and some of the advice that we think we can offer to yourself and the Secretariat in terms of responding to this letter is linked to that item. And so we would support Brazil's proposal to just put a pin in this one and take up this recommendation when we take up CITES and forests. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? I'll sort of sum up, I think, where we have landed on little paragraph E is that I'm hearing support for that. And then when it comes to the addendum, what I'm hearing is that I should table this item. We'll come back to it when we discuss the document on CITES and forests. Looking for the Secretariat if that we can do that. Yeah, so we will, so as Canada so aptly said, put a pin in this one and discuss it. Please, in case I forget, I'm sure one of you will remind me that when we get to CITES and forests that we have this item still pending. But then with that, I think we can conclude document 16. I'm showing I have an NGO wishing to speak. I will give the floor since I haven't had an NGO, but now I've got several NGOs wanting to speak to this. If it's on the conclusions, I think we're reaching conclusions, so I will, in the essence of time, call on FAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As anticipated in the previous agenda item, FAO continues to work closely with the Secretariat, especially in relation to the aspects of implementation of the Convention. Beyond zoonotic diseases, our collaborative areas include legal acquisition findings, national laws for the implementation of the Convention, technical and legal issues related to forestry and wildlife species, and commercially exploited aquatic species, engagement of indigenous peoples and local communities, livelihoods, jaguars, and ICCWC. Especially, we would like to mention that FAO, in its capacity as chair of the Collaborative Partnership on Forests, wishes to express its deep appreciation for the exceptional leadership and service of the CITES Secretary General, who served as CPF Vice Chair last year. With CITES listing for forest species now covering 700 tree species, FAO recognizes the critical role of supporting CITES parties in implementing the Convention for these species. Within its mandate and available human and financial resources, FAO stands ready to collaborate with CPF members, parties, and the Secretariat to ensure the sustainable and legal management of CITES-listed tree species, including through CITES and Forests agenda and engagement in the CITES Tree Species Program. Finally, at the recent CPF retreat in New York, FAO collaborated with CPF partners to align the partnership's vision with actionable goals and set priorities for its 2025-2028 work plan, reinforcing FAO's collaboration with CITES in promoting the sustainable and legal management of forest species. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Cognizant of the time and that we haven't even started compliance yet, I will call on one other observer organization and I will call on traffic. And I also, and UNEP, for the patience of the interpreters, I know you only have 2 minutes, but that doesn't mean you use the 2 minutes to speak very quickly because the interpreters have to follow this and be able to. So I ask you to use your 2 minutes, but not just speak fast and say 3 minutes and 2 minutes. Really, it is hard on the interpreters and also probably many of us who are trying to listen. So I call on UNEP and then traffic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United Nations Environment Programme appreciates the Secretariat's document on this agenda item, highlighting key collaborative initiatives, including engagements at the UN Environment Assembly, UNEA 6, and through the Bern process. UNEP reaffirms its commitment to working closely with CITES in strengthening synergies and mutual supportiveness in implementation of relevant resolutions and decisions. We recognize and appreciate CITES' valuable contribution to UNEA 6 discussions, which included for the first time in history a supplementary agenda item on cooperation with MEAs. At UNEA 6 in March 2024, member states adopted several resolutions of relevance to CITES, including Resolution 6/4 on promoting synergies, cooperation and collaboration for national implementation of MEAs, and Resolution 6/6 on fostering national action to address global environmental challenges through enhanced cooperation between UNEA, UNEP and MEAs. We also appreciate the active participation of CITES in the Bern III Conference on Cooperation among Biodiversity-related Conventions in early 2024, which explored interlinkages across 16 MEAs in the areas of biodiversity, pollution, and climate change. In this regard, we are pleased to submit the Bern III Conference report as an information document to this meeting. Its findings and recommendations can contribute meaningfully to ongoing discussions on cooperation with MEAs and other international organizations. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to UNEA 7, which will take place from 8th to 12th December in 2025 in Nairobi, and includes an agenda item on cooperation with MEAs. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on traffic, and I wish to apologize to Animal Canada and WCS, but traffic will be the last intervention I take on this matter, because I think we've come to conclusion, and I'm very cognizant of the time that we are way behind now on compliance, which is very important. So traffic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the honor to address the plenary on behalf of the Collaborative Partnership on Sustainable Wildlife Management. And 13 CPW partner organizations extend their deep appreciation for the leadership of the CITES Secretary General, who has served as chair of the CPW since July 2022 and has been re-elected until July 2026. The CPW enhances the implementation of intergovernmental commitments on sustainable wildlife management through its 11 joint initiatives of the 2023 to 2025 work plan. CITES relevant initiatives include completion of a gap analysis supporting CBD Decision 1523 on sustainable wildlife management, development of methodologies for GBF Target 5, sustainable use, and Target 4 on human-wildlife conflict, and testings of CITES non-detriment findings guidance to strengthen sustainable wildlife management. CPW remains committed to supporting sustainable wildlife management agendas on biodiversity-related MEAs, including CITES, CBD, and CMS. In this regard, we are pleased to announce a strategic retreat on 10 February in Geneva, focusing on prioritizing actions for CPW's work plan beyond 2025, strengthening collaboration, enhancing IP and LC engagement, and developing a resource mobilization strategy. Finally, we warmly invite all parties to the CPW side event on 7 February at 12:15 in room 14, which will highlight key CPW initiatives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And with that, I conclude this item, and we move on to the next item in the agenda, document 23, Compliance Assistance Program, and I call on the Secretariat to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. The document summarizes the progress on the implementation of decisions on the Compliance Assistance Program, including updates on the 8 beneficiary parties. The Standing Committee is invited to acknowledge the progress made by the CAP parties and to encourage other parties with multiple and long-term compliance challenges to seek CAP support, taking into account the Secretariat's analysis on the improvement of the CAP delivery model. The committee is also invited to review and submit a set of new draft decisions for continued implementation of CAP contained in annex of the document. Thank you.
Thank you. So basically, the recommendations for discussion are found in paragraph 61, and I open up the floor to Standing Committee members on document 23. With Standing Committee particularly paying attention to the draft decisions contained in the annex to the document. Not seeing. I've got Brazil.
Thank you. We just have a question for the Secretariat to identify if they know how much in total was available for through financial support in the compliance assistance program, and we ask for this information to be included in the report. This is just a request. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I think the Secretariat can accommodate that. Nigeria. But again, went to parties. So any other standing committee members wanting to speak? Really, I ask parties to wait till I say parties. Okay, I'll move on to observer parties and a call on Nigeria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nigeria expresses gratitude to the Secretariat for extending the Compliance Assistance Program to support the implementation of the compliance mechanism outlined in Article 13. Nigeria has successfully completed several activities related to the 5 thematic areas of the CAP work plan. However, some activities remain ongoing. The delays experienced can be attributed to challenges in the timely access of funds transferred to the government account. Nigeria remains committed to achieving the objectives of CAP program and is confident that the timeline established by the Secretariat for project completion will be met. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have the EU followed by Vietnam.
The EU and its member states welcome the progress made by those parties supported under the Compliance Assistance Program. We agree with the draft decisions proposed by the Secretariat.
Thank you. I call on Vietnam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vietnam is among selected countries under the support of the Compliance Assistance Program. As one of the main objectives of the project, we expect that the program shall assist Vietnam to complete the remaining activities of National Ivory Action Plans. By working together with the Secretariat, project activities have been designed and tailored to meet the interests and needs at national context. To this end, Vietnam supports the recommendation made under paragraph 60 and wish for continued cooperation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China agrees that the Compliance Assistance Program has benefited relevant parties. We also agree the new draft decisions proposed by the Secretariat and that decisions 1944 to 1946 have been implemented and they can be deleted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I call on observer organizations if anyone's requesting the floor. In which case I can sum where I think the Standing Committee is falling on this one. I think this is where we are. The Standing Committee can acknowledge the commitment of parties benefiting from the CAP to improve their compliance status and welcome the results obtained through the CAP by the respective parties. The Standing Committee would encourage parties facing multiple and long-term compliance issues to express an interest in benefiting from the CAP. And little paragraph C, the Standing Committee would note the overall findings of the Secretariat relating to the implementation of the CAP and invite the Secretariat and concerned parties to take them into consideration in the design and implementation of future activities. And here, I think we should also note Brazil's comment and request that the Standing Committee include, when it reports on the CAP, the amount of funding that was available. Then lastly, I've heard nothing but support. and so the Standing Committee would agree to submit the draft decisions contained in the annex to document SC 78, document 23 for consideration at the Conference of the Parties at its 20th meeting. And finally, the Standing Committee agrees that decisions 1944 to 19.46 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. This is what I've heard agreement, so I look to the Standing Committee for thumbs up or nodding heads that this is where we're ending up on this document. Thank you all, and we've concluded with this one, and now we are into the compliance documents, and before we discuss them, I would like to, we're now going to returning to agenda item 33, which is the application of Article 13 in Bangladesh. And the guidance I'm going to give applies to all the compliance articles as we discuss them. As we discuss these series of Article 13 compliance cases over the next few sessions, I would like to suggest the following order and time limits for interventions. First, I will give the Secretariat the floor to make its introduction on the agenda item in 1 minute. I hope you have all read these compliance documents. They're quite lengthy. If you have not, I encourage you to use your time tonight to do so. I will then give the floor to the subject party. For example, the first one is Bangladesh in case of the agenda item. The Article 13 parties will be given 5 minutes to make their intervention because it's important that we hear from them in our decision making, and they've been told they have 5 minutes. After this, I will open the floor for comments from the Standing Committee members, observer parties, and observer organizations in the usual order. Reminder, Standing Committee members have 3 minutes, observer parties and observer organizations 2 minutes. I will sum up and make conclusions after each article case. Is this an acceptable way forward to the Standing Committee? I'm seeing nodding heads. Compliance takes a lot of time, and I'm cognizant that somehow I've managed to get us behind schedule already. But I think we've had some good discussions. With that, I will start with document 33.3, application of Article 13 in Bangladesh. I see Brazil.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Sorry for interrupting you, but Brazil just would like to make a general intervention on the compliance matters. So I was wondering if I should do it now or should wait until we finish the process of the specific countries.
I would ask Brazil if the comment relates to how we're going to proceed and discuss these, which is one by one. Then I would take the intervention now. Otherwise, if it's a general observation on compliance, I would rather take that at the end, because I really would like to get through these compliance cases first.
Okay, then I will make the intervention at the end. Thank you very much.
So with that, we will move to item 33.3, the application of Article 13 in Bangladesh, and I will call upon the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first item on compliance, the Secretariat wished to recall that as provided in the Guide to CITES Compliance Procedures in the Annex to Resolution COMP 14.3 Rev COP 19, the approach to compliance is supportive and non-adversarial with the aim to ensure long-term compliance. Document 33.3 summarizes progress made by Bangladesh in the implementation of recommendations agreed at SC 77. This document presents the Secretariat's review of the report submitted by Bangladesh, along with its recommendations to the committee concerning the application of Article 13 in Bangladesh. Main conclusions are contained in paragraphs 42 to 47. Considering progress made, the Standing Committee is invited to consider recommendations contained in paragraph 49, including a recommendation that parties continue to suspend commercial trade in specimens of CITES-listed birds with Bangladesh until the party is in a position to adequately regulate and monitor trade in CITES-listed birds. It is proposed that the implementation of Article 13 in Bangladesh be reviewed again at SC 79 in November 2025. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And we heard the Secretariat considering the recommendations to continue the suspension in specimens of CITES-listed birds and other recommendations. So I turn to Standing Committee, I turn to Bangladesh to present their arguments. Can Bangladesh please request to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bangladesh appreciates the Secretariat's conclusion that Bangladesh demonstrates efforts and progress towards the implementation of most of the SC 77 recommendations. The Secretariat determined that Bangladesh fully implemented one recommendation from the SC 77 to achieve compliance with another partially implemented and further clarifications needed on the third recommendation. The Secretariat notes substantive efforts by Bangladesh regarding legislation and law enforcement, commending the full implementation of one and the partial implementation of the other two SC 77 recommendations. The Secretariat also recognizes progress made in the implementation of the Convention with regard to CITES-listed marine species and efforts made by Bangladesh on the handling of live animals and disposal of seized live specimens. It suggested additional actions for strengthening the capacity of our national scientific authority. We understand that more remains to be done for addressing compliance issues and closing remaining gaps following recommendations from the SC 77. However, Bangladesh asks that the Standing Committee keep in mind that the accomplishments reported to date are achieved without additional resource allocations while our country is undergoing our major political changes. Given the need of coordinating technically and legally challenging multi-agency efforts across several government sectors and ministries, the time frame provided does not suffice for addressing the actionable recommendations and ensuring their full implementation. The government of Bangladesh remains committed to enacting the necessary legal and procedural changes to improve compliance with the Convention. Bangladesh agrees to submitting another progress report ahead of the SC 79, including action plans and timelines for the adoption and entry into force of the initiated revisions, regulations, national coordination committees, and trainings required to fully implement all recommendations. To continue our progress towards CITES compliance, Bangladesh requests government and non-government partners to continue their technical and financial support. Bangladesh appreciates the continued guidance and assistance from the CITES Secretariat and its legal wing for ensuring that the CITES directives are appropriately addressed. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. I now open the floor to Standing Committee members. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do acknowledge the progress made by Bangladesh and support the draft recommendations as mentioned in the document. We do want to highlight the importance of a timely exchange of information between parties for successfully combating illegal trade. As mentioned in paragraph 28, the Netherlands and Belgium reached out to the Management Authority of Bangladesh
for receiving information on seizures for enforcement purposes, as mentioned in SC 77 Doc 33.3. We therefore encourage the Management Authority of Bangladesh to provide the requested information in line with paragraph 16 of Resolution Conf 18.6, the designation and the role of the Management Authority, and paragraph 5 and 15 of Resolution Conf 11.3, compliance and enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Other standing committee members wishing to speak? I then open up the floor to observer parties. I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the United States appreciates Bangladesh's efforts to address the issues raised to the attention of the Standing Committee at SC 77, as well as the Secretariat's work in reviewing this matter and Bangladesh's implementation of the recommendations. We would draw the Committee's attention to our information document SC 78 Inf 32. In line with the approach described in that document, with regard to the recommendation found in paragraph 49A chapeau of document SC 78 Doc 33.3, the United States requests that the Standing Committee defer the decision on this recommendation to a future CITES meeting, i.e. SC 79, COP 20, or SC 81. However, the United States supports the Standing Committee recommending that Bangladesh undertake the several specific activities identified in subparagraphs I, little I, and 3 little I under paragraph 49A, and the remaining recommendations in paragraph 49. The United States also supports the recommendation in paragraph 50. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a suggestion from the United States added to these recommendations, if I understand it correctly, is to postpone the decision by the Standing Committee on basically keeping the trade suspension in place. So I look for comments on that in addition to the recommendations in the document. Standing Committee members, observer parties. I see Canada.
Thank you, Chair. So before our specific comments, I'm just going to remind ourselves that for us, compliance matters need to be closely linked to the obligations under the Convention, that we highly value this process and the importance that it brings to ensuring that we are all in compliance with our obligations. We recognize that adoption of compliance measures should be taken deliberately and soberly and when essential, and that they should be clear and precise in order to achieve the goal of being in compliance with the Convention. In this regard, so first to the point raised by the United States, we do not agree to defer. We feel that actions have occurred and there's information here, and it's unclear to us how we would proceed if the decision were deferred, and so we think one way or another, the Standing Committee should come to a conclusion in terms of whether to retain or not the suspension of commercial trade in CITES-listed birds. From Canada's perspective, we agree with the recommendations that are in the document specific to the suspension of commercial trade in specimens of CITES-listed birds. So we understand that the actions associated with the suspension are in subparagraph A of paragraph 49, and we do agree that it will be important to, in particular, operationalize and further develop the online permitting system in order to achieve compliance with Article 8, paragraph 6 of the Convention. Thank you, Chair.
I call on Israel.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to echo Canada and support that the recommendations that are in paragraph 49 and 50 of the document. In regards to the United States comment on on not reaching decision here. We're not really sure what the implications of that is, since there is a trade suspension in effect. So not deciding, it's not really clear what that means in terms of that trade suspension. Does it get suspended temporarily, or does it continue temporarily? So basically, we support the Secretariat's or the recommendations that are in the document. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other parties asking to take the floor. I'll turn to observer organizations. I've got WCS and Animal Canada.
Thank you, Chair. WCS stands ready to continue to collaborate with the government of Bangladesh on its efforts to address the recommendations in Doc 33.3. We have provided support to the relevant agencies in their efforts to date to ensure compliance with CITES, particularly regarding trade in bird species, and we will continue to engage in support of the government's efforts to combat illegal wildlife trade. We acknowledge the progress made to date and agree with the Secretariat's analysis. While some progress has been made, there is a need for further work. WCS remains ready to further support the government of Bangladesh in its effort to implement the recommendations of the Standing Committee. We also wish to thank here the government of Bangladesh for including reference to our ongoing support in implementing CITES shark and ray listings. We applaud the progress the government has made and stand by to assist on this issue moving forward with a focus on needed actions detailed in the document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Animal Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The organization is Animal Alliance of Canada, and since this is our first time taking the floor, I'd just like to briefly express our thanks to the Government of Switzerland, the Secretariat, and if I may also, personal congratulations to the Chair on assuming her role, and I wish her the very best for her term going forward. This is in reference to the paragraphs in the document referring to Cambodia, in which the Secretariat specifically asks parties to exercise due diligence with request to imports of macaques from that country. And this issue is going to come up again, I understand, under item 35. I'd just like to mention in connection with the urgency of this issue that, as a matter of fact, the Canadian transportation authorities have issued a permit to an American company allowing a transfer of macaques.
Excuse me, Animal Alliance of Canada, we are not discussing the macaques right now. We are discussing Article 13 for Bangladesh. I ask your indulgence to, if you have something specific to discuss on Bangladesh, to raise it, but I do not want to broaden this discussion.
My apologies for misunderstanding, Madam Chair. I would hope I would have a chance to bring this up again when we get to that item. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? And I do appreciate, again, the thank yous, but please let's start to stop because it's taking time away from substantive matters. So we all acknowledge your thank yous and let this be the end of thank yous, both to Secretariat, Switzerland, and the Chair. Thank you. So anyone else wishing to speak to Article 13 in Bangladesh? I will not see anyone speaking. I will pause a minute to consult with the Secretariat just to be sure the Chair has the sense in the room correct. So what the Chair has heard is support from both a member of the Standing Committee and several parties in support of the Secretariat's recommendation. The U.S. has asked to defer this. That caused similar questions. I didn't hear any support for the U.S. Deference of this issue. So basically, I would put forward that the Standing Committee acknowledges the progress made by Bangladesh in addressing the compliance matters leading to recommendations as agreed to at SC 77. However, I think the Standing Committee will agree to to support the recommendations made by the Secretariat in the paragraphs 48 to 50 for Bangladesh, and the trade suspension in CITES listed bird species would remain in effect till they report again and we reconsider this. So am I correct in my understanding that this is how the Standing Committee wishes to proceed? I'm looking for nodding heads, or if I'm confused, somebody to correct me. This is one of those where I will take, it's unfortunate, in compliance, I'd rather have some nodding heads or thumbs up, but I'm taking silence as an agreement with the recommendations put forward by the Secretariat for Bangladesh. I'm seeing more nodding heads. I'll try to be clearer in the future. Okay, I think we can conclude this one then, and thank you. I think we will open up the next one and see how far we get. Could I ask the interpreters, I know we have a reception and I don't want to keep people from having some fun this evening. I also see the U.S. raising their flag and is on my speaker list now. So I will turn to the U.S. and then I will try to open up the other item. But if the interpreters would consider giving me 5 minutes to perhaps introduce the next agenda item. So I will go to the U.S.
Yes, Chair.
This is on Bangladesh still.
Thank you, Chair. Since the committee has decided not to defer the decision to a future meeting with respect to the recommendation to retain the recommended trade suspension, the United States notes that it is not able to take a position at this time. This is without prejudice to our ability to express positions on this matter in the future, pending further guidance from our administration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, U.S. That'll be noted. I will now move on to agenda item 33.5, Article 13 compliance in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I should also say that the Democratic Republic of Congo has now, as alternate member on the Standing Committee, assumed acting Standing Committee member because Chad is not present, so DRC will be sitting here with the Standing Committee as acting member. So I did want to make that clear. And now I will turn to the Secretariat to introduce document 33.5.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document is a summary of progress made by the Democratic Republic of Congo in the implementation of the recommendations of the SC77. This has a summary of the report submitted by the DRC and the conclusions of the Secretariat. The Standing Committee is principally invited to renew the recommendations adopted at SC77 with the recommendation to suspend trade in specimens of Psittacus erytacus and to take note of progress made by the DRC. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now turn to the Democratic Republic of Congo and give the floor to them to express their views in the 5 minutes we have remaining.
Merci, Madame. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank all the members of the committee. First of all, we would like to thank the Secretariat for the summary report, and also to say that the Democratic Republic of Congo would like to thank the Management Authority of Turkey and the World Trust Funds and the Parrot for having helped us with the repatriation of these parrots, which have been reinstated to their natural environment. And we'd like to say that the DRC continues to uphold the suspension and takes note of the progress that has been recognized by the Secretariat. When it comes to the other matters linked to the implementation, the application of Article 13 on the work against criminal activities and work with customs and other services for support, we would like to say that the substantial efforts have been noted and are continuing to strengthen the regulatory framework, and we have updated the law 014, which was updated in December, to ensure that we have a positive element to try and mitigate and strengthen progress in the fight against these actions. We have transmitted all reports without exceptions on imports and illegal trade, including the report on the National Ivory Action Plan for the period for 2022 to 2024. And we also welcome the support of the Secretariat for having provided us with a mission for guidance and advice, and we have adjusted at the government level our work. We also welcome the support that we've had from the Secretariat in particular. What we're going to be working on is the IT system, and in particular the tracking and reliability management system, which in the coming weeks is going to be set up and continued. We would also like to recognize support from some partner organizations, and we welcome their continued support. And this improvement in terms of the issues linked to Article 13 requires resources, in particular when it comes to the African grey parrot. And we still need assistance with the management plan. And we have undertaken contact with partners in South Africa to obtain greater assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we can start the debate. Should we start? Given that we have the reception, we will start the debate on this matter, on this agenda item tomorrow morning. I ask you to be prompt and think about tonight the recommendations before us with the DRC, and enjoy the reception this evening, and I'll turn to the Secretariat for any housekeeping items.
Thank you, Chair. I have two housekeeping announcements. First of all, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as acting member of the Standing Committee for Africa, has requested to join the drafting group for access to funding, document SC 78, Doc 11. This has been accepted by the Standing Committee Chair. This drafting group on access to funding will meet tomorrow, Tuesday, at 5 p.m., or immediately after the afternoon session, and this will take place in room number 12. Thank you, Chair.
That I will adjourn our session today, get some rest. We still have 5 more days and quite a packed agenda, but I do appreciate everyone's cooperation today following the time limit. So thank you.